All right, hello everyone. Welcome to another session of Lens with Advanced Design. My name is Hector Silva. Today we have the pleasure of hosting industrial designer Jon Grossman, who is a designer at Alphabet, where he works on innovative healthcare products for Verily Life Sciences. Before that, he was an industrial designer at Frog, where he worked on a wide range of projects. Think everything from draft beer infrastructure to strollers. He's led projects around the world, San Francisco, Munich, Shanghai, while balancing what hasn't been done yet with what can be. And previously, Jon attended the University of Cincinnati, the DAP program, where he completed internships at design studios internationally, such as Antwerp, Paris, Seattle, LA, and San Francisco. Today, our talk is going to be focusing on our discipline, the ID industry, right? And it is very carefully stated as ID industry. We need to talk. The world surrounding our careers has evolved, but the way that we talk about our work and jobs has not. So we're very excited to have Jon here speak about this topic. So thank you, Jon, for joining us. And right before I give Jon the floor to share his thoughts and insights, I do have a plug. This is not a paid advertisement, but I do want to let you guys know that before we dive into this conversation with Jon, a design book that recently came in my hands called 101 Things I Learned in Product Design School. And it was done by my professor in grad school, designer and educator Sung Jang, and his business partner, Martin Thaler of the IIT Institute of Design in Chicago. It's a nice small book. It's as you can see, it's a equivalent of a gigantic Samsung Galaxy Note, and it's a really, it's really easy to understand. It clarifies our industry in a very nice and clean way. I'll link the book in this chat so that you guys can check it out. It's very inexpensive, so please support the book if you can. I'll have a full write-up on this book in our Advanced Design Instagram page under our archive initiative, so be on the lookout for it. With that being said, Jon, I'm going to give the floor over to you and ID industry. Let's have a chat.
Excellent. I'm going to share my screen. It's going to take a second to click on everything to get it in the right way. So 30 seconds.
Sounds good. And while we're waiting, for those who are tuning in, if you do have any questions, please ask it in the Q&A section so that I can integrate those in our conversation with Jon.
Okay. Can you see my screen?
Good to go.
Excellent. Oops. All right. Hi, everyone. Oops. Wait, let's go back one. So thanks for coming today. Just what I want to talk with you about is what it means to have a career in industrial design. I'm going to share a little bit of my background and some of my work up until now. And I'm going to be pretty open in this presentation, sharing some of my personal experiences in ID and some of my actual work as I've grown as a designer. But my goal is not to focus on sharing a body of work that I've done or talking through my design process. I don't see this as a portfolio review, and more of a conversation on what exactly is an ID career. So, hi, I'm Jon. There's my face. I'm here too. I'm currently an industrial designer living in San Francisco. If you'd like to see more of my work, you can go to my website, jongrossman.com. I currently work at Verily Life Sciences, which is an Alphabet company at the intersection of technology and healthcare. I really like my job. I feel very lucky to be working there and on products that make people's lives better every day. And quick shameless plug, we just started our search for an ID intern for the summer of 2021. You can apply at verily.com and navigate to the careers page. And I'm going to be pretty clear up front. I can't talk about or share my work that I'm doing now, and the views shared in this presentation are my own. But I have lots still to share with you today, and I'm looking forward to discussing it afterwards. So to talk a little bit about where I've worked and how my career has looked up until now, I've been at Verily for about 2 years, working in-house on medical products. Before that, I spent 4.5 years at Frog. It's a consultancy. I was based in San Francisco, but worked on projects sort of around the world in Munich and Shanghai. And before that, I did a lot of internships. Like Hector said, I went to the University of Cincinnati, where we have an internship program that's pretty strong. And I got to work on on everything from baby products at Munchkin to bus interiors in Antwerp. And I feel like internships are a really great way to stretch yourself and try new things. And especially at the start of your career, you don't have that. You don't have like anything holding you back. So I totally recommend you go out and explore as much as you can. But anyways, like I said, I attended the University of Cincinnati. This is my first industrial design project. They've been doing this for like 40 years. It's called the Power Tool Project. In this case, I designed that thing you sign and you get a package from UPS, though I think like these days probably is a little less relevant. But I knew I wanted to work in tech pretty early. I like working on these end-to-end user experiences where there's a product, there's a UI, and then there's like a broader landscape that these products fit in. And I also enjoyed the process of coming up with ideas. Like I was always sketching, noodling on concepts, working through form, and trying to solve complicated design ideas in order to turn them into something cool. I really think that making things cool is something, it's very gratifying and something I enjoy a lot and enjoyed a lot. And it's very satisfying when you see it so beautifully in front of you. I graduated by designing fine dining in space, imagining what space tourists might eat when they go up into a space station. Somehow I got away with designing this crazy space station looking thing and still graduated. You can see a couple of parts of the design there, from the fine dining set to the space station. I have students ask me a lot, for my capstone project, what should I work on? It can be anything. My advice is work on something you're passionate about. Like you're never going to have the patience to work on something with this level of detail and this level of breadth, and do something that makes you excited. I don't recommend like trying to target it into like one very specific niche or do what you think people want to see. Just do something that makes you happy. But anyways, after graduating, I went to work at Frog. It's a consultancy, pretty old. I think they're pretty well known. And Frog like opened up a lot of doors for me, and it gave me a lot of different projects to try out. The clients are very broad, sometimes kind of random, but they range in everything from startups, like in the top middle, you can see this action camera I worked on, or this water heater down in the bottom, to large companies that are trying out new innovations. And you can see on the top left was looking at integrating technology into a stroller, or the bottom in the middle was starting to redesign how draft beer could be integrated into a bar. And I even worked on 2 refrigerators. Both of them were sort of market entry type projects. So the one in the top right was a European brand trying to enter the Chinese market, and I got to live in Shanghai to work on that one. And the one in the bottom left was a European brand trying to enter the American market, and I got to live and work in Munich when I worked on that. But by the end of my time there, my perspective on design had changed. And the more I worked on projects, I found that sketching, prototyping, rendering, really these like traditional industrial design skills, they're all tools to get to the end of a project. And as these projects developed, I started to see how this work fit into a client's larger priorities. And what this means was like the work we were doing was defining a path for our client to go on. Design work lowered the risk of developing a new product and helped guide exactly how our client should invest their next efforts. And by being able to express that direction clearly and then see teams of people organize around those goals and that strategy, it's not just like gratifying as a designer, it's very valuable to those companies. And in the last few years, I've really found myself feeling more and more alienated by ID, the work being shared online, the way we talk about ourselves, and the culture surrounding the job. I hear designers admiring high-end furniture and other like really low volume products. I see these beautiful assets online showing exploded views and circuit boards, or sketches that clearly took hours. And on top of that, there's designers on social media sharing work and skills that make me question, like, what exactly do I need to do to be successful? And the thing is when I look at what I do, both at my last and current jobs, it just doesn't look like this. You think when you get out of school, your success will be determined by your skills and ability to generate really unique ideas. And totally, there's elements of these things. But I feel they've so dominated the conversation of what it means to be an industrial designer, the skills that I feel have made me successful are just not part of this conversation. So I have 4 points I want to talk with you today. You can read them. We'll go through them one by one. You don't have to agree with all of them, but I really hope it starts a conversation around, what industrial design is and how it contributes. So first point, great design is not about creativity. It takes like a really wide range of teams to make something real, whether it's different disciplines within design to different kinds of expertise outside of design. And guiding a team of people and those teams to make the right thing is a totally different job than generating a rendering. I think this fridge project from my time in Shanghai does a great job illustrating this concept. Like while I was directly responsible for generating and presenting concepts, they were based on input and feedback from both our internal team and our client's industrial design group. So at the end of the day, like 20 different people may have touched it. And while having a novel point of view and the ability to turn that into a design direction is table stakes, it's turning like the way we get jobs into an act that's very different from the job itself. It's really hard to be the person that does research, synthesis, sketching, presentations, refining, engineering, UI design, app design, like photography, art direction. All of these skills they can be mastered by an individual, and it takes a team of people to make something excellent happen. And the more complicated a project, the more people you need to make it happen. And most of my job today is figuring out how to convince people that our product direction and vision is the right way to go. Almost no one in the real world went to ID school. They don't really speak the language of cool or soft or modern. And one of my favorite stories around this was from my other fridge project in Munich. We were working on 3 concepts at the time. We had a sort of metal, minimalist, sharp design fridge. We had a warm, comforting fridge with some wood shelves inside. Then we had a concept that was very high-tech and futuristic. And we presented all 3 to our client, and it was really well received. In Germany, at the end of a presentation, they tend to knock on the table instead of clap. That's kind of a cool reaction. And then the question they posed to us was like, these are great. Which is going to sell more? And I didn't know how to answer that question. Like, you can think of, like, I think as industrial designers, we're equipped to answer what types of people might buy a design or who this product is right for, but not really how much of them will sell or what's the one that is going to be most successful. And finding ways to communicate with people that do that type of work is easily the hardest part of my job. So 2, design is about making money. One of my go-to examples for how industrial design adds value to a product is the toaster. The technology is like not changed since forever. I grabbed this advertisement on Google Image from like the 1920s, but the design has evolved, right? And I think when you think about a toaster, you have this heating element. The technology hasn't changed, and a company, if they wanted to sell you a toaster, they can only sell so many toasters that look a certain way. And as an industrial designer, you're able to reshape that technology or add new features or change the color or help differentiate like one toaster from another and effectively to sell more things. And you can start laddering this out to other products, to other brands. And ID really like thrived in this space where we're differentiating products, helping brands differentiate from each other with the goal of being able to sell more stuff. And until very recently, ID had a very clear role in our economy, right? Like people bought stuff. And like the goal as an industrial designer was to make the thing that became the quintessential object that represented that product category. So that maybe one day your rake or your chair might end up in the MoMA. Like this is a photo I found. But some things have changed. Like our economy turned digital. The things that need industrial design, like or used to need industrial design, don't really need it anymore. And now this might not sound like super like insightful. Like of course, yeah, I have a camera app and a calculator app, but this ladders up into our career because selling stuff like physical objects, it's no longer the most effective way to make money, right? If you think about back in the heyday of ID, you would hear a lot about inventors in their garage and they come up with an idea, and then you would need to make an object. Now it's just software companies in a garage coming up with apps. And while that's not a bad thing, it makes for a complicated landscape for us to operate in. And it kind of poses a really big question, right? Like, where does industrial design and by extension hardware add the most value in a software world? And for me, if I look at companies that are doing work that I find really interesting, it's at this really like nebulous intersection of hardware and software, and not just like hardware with a connected app, but really where hardware builds on the software business case. And to be honest, I'm actually really optimistic. I believe hardware is this like really great differentiator when you have a bunch of software offerings that are kind of similar. And with the right overall product vision and the right user experience can be a very strong advantage for a company. And this is a really great opportunity for ID to lead. Point 3, the more novel technology is, the less the need is for differentiated design. So when you develop a new technology, it really means you're making new behaviors. If you have a thing that is like 100% net new, you don't necessarily need it to be an iconic, timeless design. You don't even know if the thing is going to work. Part of like your job on a product that never really existed before is to make sure that people will use it and it's the right product. And so the more cutting edge your ID work is, the more your job is to figure out how to make new behaviors not only possible, but really accepted. And an example from a project that I worked on was this redesign of a syringe for naloxone or Narcan. Naloxone is a drug that reverses the effect of an opiate overdose. So if someone's overdosing, you can spray it in their nose and they'll stop overdosing. It's great. It saves lives. The existing syringe has a lot of different parts. You have to assemble it in the emergency, and you actually have to spray half in one nostril and half in the other. I redesigned it so that you only had to spray it once. I don't think that this design is particularly beautiful or timeless or elegant or any of those other traditional words. But I do think that the design is really resonant because it speaks to how it's used and why that changes the way the technology exists. And when we ladder that up, we have to be really thoughtful about how we push our teams to invest in our designs, right? It's not always about shaving millimeters off of a design. I think there's this like this thought that like industrial design and engineering are in this like constant state of not struggle but tension. And I propose that like as designers we should be thinking higher level and be thinking like, why am I working on this and how do I help guide a team to make this in the way that's most viable? And that whenever you're working on especially when you're working on like a new technology or a thing that's totally new, the questions you're asking and the ways you're engaging with teams are different. And helping teams plan out not just the right way to engage with you, but engage with you over time and plan out a project roadmap is very valuable to that company and to that team. And it helps you become seen as more strategic. And then finally, my 4th point, there's a lot of opportunity for us to reframe industrial design. I think there's this common team building question that you get asked, like, what is a superpower? What's your superpower? And I think as an ID, we know exactly what a product should be. And the thing to know is that there's a whole discipline in the corporate world called product management, not project management. And we can align really closely with them to help influence the direction a product goes. And the thing is that PMs live really high in the corporate hierarchy, but they don't have this background in product design. And I'd propose that our goal should be to define products, not just skin circuit boards that get handed down to us. And there's 2 real big reasons why it matters that this hierarchy exists and where like different types of people live in that hierarchy. One is that it determines who has control over product decisions. Like if as a designer, you think it's totally vital to invest in an expensive product design or expensive in a design, invest in a design solution that really pushes the limits of the product in one way or another, you can't make that decision just as an individual designer. You only have input into it. And then second, this hierarchy is directly related to compensation. The more important your decision-making is, the more money you get paid. And then the second area of opportunity I see is that we're beginning to reimagine our products and services to be climate neutral. You're starting to see this at a lot of large companies, but I think sustainability and figuring out how to turn our products into something that will keep the world safe is a space that's like really well suited for ID. I like to equate it with usability, where like as industrial designers are really thinking about the user. And on one hand, one side of that is making stuff that's easy to use. On the other side of that is making stuff that the user doesn't have to worry is sort of destroying the world, right? And how we engage to make sustainable products could be in a lot of different ways. There's the redesigning something to be designed to be disassembled, so it can be easily taken apart, or maybe it's you advocating for an exploration around different materials that could replace a virgin plastic with a post-consumer recycled plastic. Or maybe it's you're helping your company or your team envision how to collect used products and recycle them. However you do it, it's not just an industrial design challenge in terms of the shape or finding like a really futuristic mushroom leather. This is a very technical problem. And it's one that ID, I think, is really well suited to lead. But however we do it, we really need to move past highlighting our technical skills and creative exploration as core to why companies should lead with industrial design. So once again, here are my 4 points. I'm really looking forward to the Q&A and discussing this with you guys. Thank you.
All right, thanks, John. Fantastic. So as we're having our conversation, like I mentioned, if you have any questions, make sure you are asking them in the Q&A. But that being said, let's kick things off. John, you brought up some very good points. And obviously, this is all coming from experience, from you working at different places and gathering this information and data for you to come up with some of these insights. My question to you is, how can we start teaching this in education? Because that's where it starts. That's how we start to mold the future, the next generation of designers, right? When design education has a lot of issues already, how do we start to have that conversation with faculty and start to change some thinking there? Because in the beginning of your presentation, you made some very good points on how, you look at industrial design, the very first thing we do is we go on Instagram and we look at things that really don't line up with how real industry is, right? So that can be very misleading.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question and something I actually think a lot about, but don't have a wonderful answer to. But to brainstorm on it a little bit, I think one thing that I wish I learned a little more in school would be, 2 topics. One would be around business models. So like being able to communicate, or one, understand what a business model is, and then communicate to someone what their business model is. And then 3, show how design expands on that business model. So like if you're selling, you're selling mice, right? And you want to tell your company, hey, we should invest in making like an expensive mouse. That's because we see this market opportunity, and with a design, like we think we can accelerate the adoption of this, or whatever, however you want to like phrase it, but like understanding like why industrial design exists within a company. So that's sort of one bucket of things, is being able to communicate more on like how businesses operate. The second would be around this idea of sphere of influence. I think like something that I really thought in school is that your work speaks for itself. And I think like social media sort of amplifies this, that like if you put like a really beautiful render out there, it's going to like just convince people. I don't know, you put a rendering in a deck and everyone will just believe you. And the reality is that there's a lot more soft skills. Like my job, I wake up every morning starting at like usually 8:30 or 9. I'm in meetings till 5 or 6, solid, like back to back to back to back to back. And it's because I'm talking to people every day about their understanding of the project, my understanding of the project, and like working through like what needs to happen. And I think that learning how to conduct yourself in those meetings and learning how to express why a direction is the right way to go, it's not like as simple as just showing them a rendering and being like, and that's it, let's make it happen. So those are 2 areas that I would really push for.
That's fair. So I think it's fair to say that, adding courses in traditional academia, like the business of design, it's probably pretty important.
Yeah, I think the business of design is different though. So it's funny, I actually had this whole section of like, what is the business model behind consulting? And I cut it because it felt a little extra. But knowing like how to sell like a design service is very different than understanding what your company's business model is and why your company is adding value. And so like, and I think this is why you start to see specializations, not just within designs, but within industries. Because like understanding the business model for selling tents is totally different than the business model that's driving like phone sales or products that support software, or maybe like bicycles. Like each one of those is just a totally different industry, and how design adds value to those industries is just different.
Yeah, someone just asked, please put the business model of consulting if you can.
You want me to put up that slide? I can totally share that.
That'd be great.
Yeah, take me like a couple seconds to find it.
Yeah, so while you're looking for that, I do have some questions that I'm going to start sending your way. So one question is, what type of education as traditional industrial designers are we lacking?
What type of education? All right, I'll answer that question and then I can share this slide. So what type of education are we lacking? I see, for me, it's not that there's like a lacking of any one thing. It's that like, I think there's this misunderstanding of what role like the design work you're producing plays within an organization. And like, I think as designers, we're just so inclined to believe that like the artistic value of the work we're generating is like, it's it. Like that's the end of the day. And what I'm finding is like, if like I can have a rendering, like a photorealistic rendering, I can render the product in someone's hand, and someone still doesn't exactly understand the project. And it's not until like you've sat down and like understood what their point of view is that like, oh, it's not about the rendering. It's like for them, they don't know how we're going to provide customer support when someone has a question about this feature. And then you have to like figure out how do you provide customer support to someone when they have this problem and working through all these challenges. And it's just that the way that you solve problems is far more holistic than just the sketching and the rendering and these traditional skills. Here's my little business model slide. Can you see it?
Yeah.
Okay. So within design consulting, you have your profit on one side, and there's an equation, right? You have your win rate times your inbound leads plus your win rate times your outbound leads minus your overhead. And it's like, hold on, what does this mean? Before I get into explaining that, there's some things that I think are really important to recognize here, which is like, one, this is where our salaries come from. And the fact that like no one ever showed me that, hey, business could be like boiled down to an equation that has levers in it that you can pull and be creative with, is kind of odd to me. Like you start to realize that this is how general managers, this is how business people are thinking. And in design school, we just assume everything can be visually explained visually, but it's just not true. And where this equation come from, by the way, it was the old general manager at Frog when I was there. He would sit us down every month for a business of Frog type update, and he used to explain sort of how we were going about generating leads. So let's start with this first half. You have your win rate and your inbound leads. Win rate are the number of pitches you're able to convert into projects. And there's two types of project leads. And a project lead is a potential project, inbound and outbound. Inbound leads are projects that find you. So like you can see I listed a few ways that projects can find you. One, like I think a really good example would be speaking at South by Southwest. You go to speak at South by Southwest, and 150 people are like there listening to you, and 25 of them come to you, in the next couple of weeks, be like, hey, I heard your talk. You might be a good fit for this project, right? It's casting a wide net and seeing what comes to you. And there's a lot of activities that sort of fit within the casting a wide net type thing. On the other hand, you have outbound leads, and these are projects that you pursue. So maybe there's like a specific company you want to work for. You find someone on LinkedIn and you message them. You're like, hey, I really want to work with you. Are you interested in collaborating? Are you interested in a project? There's all sorts of outbound lead type activities you can do, but they tend to be more focused. And then your overhead is the cost it takes to generate those leads and act on them. And that's everything from the rent of your design studio, though maybe these days you don't need to pay rent. I don't know. It could be no longer as core part of design consulting as we thought it was. It's your salaries of the employees. It's the time spent on pursuing leads. It could be like if you send someone to South by Southwest, the airplane cost, right? And when you add all that up, it's a business model, right? And the way to think about this is, let's say your win rate is fixed. So you win like 1 in every 5 projects that shows up your way. If in 1 month you get 5 inbound leads and you generally win 1 in 5, you have 1 project for the month. But if in 1 month you get 100 inbound leads and you win 1 in 5, then you have 20 projects for a month. And so as a company, you're looking at like, what are the things I should invest in, the activities I should invest in that will generate the most leads. If my win rate is kind of constant, you can look at your win rate based on your past history. And I think there's like a lot of opportunity to be creative there. That's where you can look at like, maybe I should redo my portfolio this year. Maybe we should take new product photography, or maybe we should do X, Y, Z. Like, there's a lot of different activities that sort of fall into this. And as a company, you have to prioritize and decide, which of these are we going to do? Because you can't focus 100% of your activities on lead generation, for example. So does this answer your question about business models? Maybe.
Yeah, I think this does more than answer. Do you think that designers, we go to school, we learn about industrial design, you go out there, you get a job, you then work as a designer. When do you think that designers should know about this stuff? I mean, do you feel like they should even, is this something that they need to be aware of, or can they just live in their bubble and do the work? I guess, when was the first time you heard what is the return on investment coming from the business side?
I think pretty early on, actually, like probably within a couple of years. I never heard about this in my internships. And the thing is like, I kind of wish I did. And there's a couple of reasons. One is I think it changes like the way like we like see ourselves and how we have value. I think one of the points I wanted to make in my presentation is like the portfolio that we have to build is starting to feel more and more like separated from like the jobs that we have to do. And so it's like you have to show, hey, look, I can do all these amazing sketches and I can do all these amazing renders and I can art direct like and take beautiful photos in the studio and in progress and blah 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 and like line all my prototypes up in a grid. I never do that. Like that, like literally I've never done those things in my job, maybe once or twice to try and make something nice for a meeting. And so it's more that like these things that are qualifying us to get jobs are just like not the things your job ends up being. And then it's like, well, why did I spend so much time learning how to do those things when it's just less a part of it? I will say like you still need like some core ability to generate designs and execute on them. Like it's not like I'm just in meetings all day, never imagining what the product is. It's more that side of it is way less craft based, I think, than either people want to admit or we want to talk about.
Sure. Now, what is your definition of creativity? Is it regarding problem solving or more about technical skills?
Yeah, that's changed. That's one of those things that's changed. I think if you were to ask me when I was in school, like being creative was like being able to draw beautifully, be very artistic in my designs, like and come up with great ideas. I think now it's problem solving, and it's problem solving within a domain. So in that business model equation that I shared, like I think that there's a lot of opportunities to be creative. Like if as an agency you come up with a clever way to generate a lot of inbound leads, um, that's super cool. Like you turned your business like totally around because you realized that you could advertise on YouTube and find like 10,000 people at the click of a button. All you had to do is make a video with a link in it. I don't know. That's something I just made up off the top of my head. But it's knowing that like there's these equations and levers you can pull that are kind of above the design execution level that I think can actually be really meaningful to the work.
Sure. How do you orient yourself to design for entirely different markets? And that is a question from one of our audiences. And I think that question can actually go well with this other question. So I'm just trying to consolidate some questions here. Can you talk a little bit more about how you create, for example, in IT school, there really isn't a direct integration with psychology, advertising, marketing, business. How would a designer be able to start learning these essential skills outside of school? Or would these skills be driven by business employees, psychologists, etc., instead of a one-stop shop?
Yeah. To be honest, I have never worked with a psychologist. I've worked with people who studied psychology. I think there's this idea that like psychologists are somehow in the design industry and driving things. I remember thinking that in school. I haven't encountered it as much. Maybe more in the UX design side. But
For example, like your thesis that you did at DAP about space.
yeah.
Someone who has never been to space before, how were you able to justify some of the decisions that you made to create concepts for space?
Yeah, you find the experts. So at University of Cincinnati, there's an astro engineering team or engineering department, and I went there. I was like, "Hi, I want to do this space project," and I found a professor that was into it, and he had worked at NASA before on flight control systems, and shown me like, "Hey, I did this joystick thing," and we really thought about how things move in space, and so we brainstormed on some ideas for, the big design challenge with space containers, for example, is like when you're in space, like there's no up or down, right? Like the up or down is relative to Earth, it's relative to gravity. And in space, like there's nothing like you're really relative to. So if there's no up or down, there's no inside or outside. So when you talk about putting food on a plate or putting food in a bowl, it's like the thing inside the bowl is next to the inside wall of the bowl, but it's not inside the bowl. Like you can move the bowl and not move the food. So the design challenge is like, how do you keep food inside the thing? And the solution we came up with was like we came up with this fan contraption that's like kind of like on a DSLR, and it would spin, and there could be something else that's spinning in the other way to like counteract the force, but only one of the things has blades on it. I don't know if it would actually work. Like it's a design project, but I did work with some people who are experts, and like I can't recommend like talking to people who are in these spaces enough. Like maybe a thing you could do is reach out to someone on LinkedIn, like who looks like a business person, like a general manager. That's a title that's really high up there, and just talk to them about your project or your ideas. And I think you'll find very quickly they talk very differently than designers and design professors.
Here's a question that is being asked by Patrick. His question is, can you talk a little bit more about how to incorporate the digitalization trend in design with ID if everything becomes digitized? It seems like the opportunity pool in ID is shrinking. Is this true?
Yes, 100%. The career is shrinking enormously. Like getting a new job is really really hard. I remember so two examples of this, and like the pessimistic then the optimistic. So pessimistic side. When I left Frog, I knew I like was ready to look for a new job, and it took me over a year and a half to find a job. Like I got rejected from tons of places. I interviewed at a few. It took a long time to find somewhere that was a right fit, both for like what I wanted my career to be and also like someone who wanted to hire me. It's not easy. And that's because there's just so few openings at companies that need ID, because ID is very niche, right? Now, the optimistic side. As software companies become bigger and more competitive with each other, they have to differentiate themselves somehow, right? And eventually, someone's going to find the right mix of like object and software that like enables something totally new. I think we can see that trend in smart speakers right now, where like all the companies making smart speakers, none of them are speaker companies. It's not that they all have other businesses that those speakers sort of tie into. And so like not only that, you can sell those speakers at a loss in some ways, because it's like it's not just about volume. It's about expanding into other business opportunities. And so like that's one category. I think that's an example. Maybe another category would be bike shares. I don't know if you've seen like a lot of the like the rideshare companies starting to get into other mobility options, but someone has to design those mobility options, and those mobility options ladder up into a strategy. That's not just about how cool is the bicycle, but like, can the bicycle be rented on the street? How does someone lock up the bicycle? Et cetera, et cetera. How do you change the batteries of the electric bicycle? There's a lot of really challenging design problems that sort of arise when these like software ecosystems are looking to expand into new places. And it's actually really exciting. So
Yeah, and also I think with the pandemic happening and COVID, like these companies, these ride-sharing companies, they're companies are looking for other opportunities to innovate in and come up with other areas to invest in because, people no longer feel comfortable maybe going in a Uber or whatever, so they're
yeah,
investing in other spaces and creating opportunities for designers or employment. So yeah, it's a very as interesting as our world as we head towards total collapse. So here's a question. Here's a question by Anastasia. Her question is, more strategic sides of design are not as pretty as renders. So it is hard to promote those skills online and get known within the community, comparatively to technical skills such as rendering or sketching. What do you think is the best way to demonstrate those skills to a wider audience as a graduate designer, or should it simply be done within a portfolio?
oh man, that's a really great question. Like, I haven't figured out how to do it exactly. In my portfolio, like I have a PDF. I kind of have both of these things in there. So like, well, part of my year and a half journey of looking for a job, like not every company wanted to see that, even if they probably could have used it. I think that the companies that are interested in it will react to it when they see it in your portfolio. But that's not the same as how do we get people on social media to get excited around these other sides of design. Um, I, I think something that maybe could be shared a little more within the ID world is like salary information. And I think if you looked at the salaries of strategists and strategists within companies versus the salary of designers, you might be like making cool renders, but I promise you're getting paid half of what the people who are
Yeah.
doing the strategy work is. And it's cool for like a couple of years, but after a while it gets kind of old.
Yeah. Honestly, I think that also begins with, hey, let's remove the likes and follow counts on social media, and let's find other ways to engage with each other in the community, because I think that's also going to bring out a lot of these very interesting topics. Like you just said, salary, it'll bring up interesting topics. For example, I always talk about how I want to build a resume of all the jobs that I've been rejected at. And I think that'd be pretty about because I have a lot and I have behind those and thinking that I got the job and then boom, hey, we canceled the job search. And you're like, you gotta be kidding me. So that's a really good topic to talk about. So
Yeah, definitely. Another thing that comes to mind, when I just had it, I lost it, is I think UX design as a field, this is where I was going. Is UX design as a field, I think, has embraced some of the like non-visual side of their career a lot more than ID. I was actually, for this presentation, I was doing some like quick research on the US Job and Labor Bureau. And if you look at UX design, which I think is every industrial designer's favorite like pinata to poke at, there's like 200,000 of them in the US. And this is like some, job census from a couple years ago, whereas compared to industrial design, there's 40,000 of us. And I think if you looked at UX design type Instagrams and social media posts, it's really wide. Like some of those posts are just like quotes from people and people talking about how they added value. And something I would like to see more of in ID is like the value that the work they did provided. So like with every rendering, if you could tell me how many you sold because of that design decision, or if like you could say, hey, this client has come back to us 5 times. We like our lead, we got 5 new leads from this one project. But something that shows like the value of the thing that you're showing and making sure that it's like not just pretty. Like if Lemon would give you like dollar value of each thing that it was sharing, I think that would like at least help shift us over there.
I think another thing that students or anyone who's posting on these platforms should understand is the right people who are looking at those. So if it's someone like in management or the CEO or a project manager, the right person will see through some of these images. So whether you get 1,000 likes or whatever the case may be, but whoever looks at this, the person who matters, that should matter to you, that because those are the people that are going to give you the opportunities, they'll see right through it immediately. So
yeah, 100%.
Yeah, so don't be I don't know what I was going to say, but yeah, just be very cognizant of that.
Yeah, just to build on that point a little, like I think there's this tendency of designers to think that like especially circuit boards, I don't know for whatever reason that like rendering circuit boards has become like the thing these days, but like I've worked with electrical engineers now, and like I get like what's going on there, and the conversations like I'd like to see ID people like show up would be like the challenges they face around selecting LED lights, right? Like I see white LED lights and everything. I had a challenge the other day where I was trying to get a white LED light on my project, but adding a white LED light means you have to add like a crystal converter that changes the voltage of something, and then it's like, well, actually you can't have a white LED light for our budget. We can only do a green or an orange. Which do you want? And it's only a very specific type of green or specific type of orange. And it's just I don't know. Seeing like these exploded views of circuit boards where like it's clear that they're not engineered in any real way is just like devaluing to the actual work that goes into doing that stuff right.
Well, here's my counter question to you, because we do get a lot of students that watch, Lens, and I just want to make sure that honestly, that these conversations are as real as possible, because it's better that now than, somehow be shocked when you're like sitting at an interview. But to again, just to be honest, and someone might say, well, hey, Jon, these are just exercises. These are just experiments that I'm doing on social media. So why can't you just let me be? What is your response to that?
Sounds is totally fine. Like you can do whatever you want to do. It's more that like don't think that this is what the job is. Like if you're a student and you're expecting to like show up to work and be congratulated because you put a matte black finish with some copper contacts on a rendering, like even if it looks cool, like you have to think about the value you're adding to your employer and to the company you work for. And like maybe there's totally a situation where that might be the thing that like changes some of these levers that companies are looking for. But I think there's other skills that your time would be better suited, like experimenting in, that aren't rendering those things. But by all means, like have fun. I'm not saying like go be miserable and mope around all day because you can't use Keyshot.
That's fair. All right, I have one last question to ask you, and I think we can wrap this conversation up. And the question is regarding that internship opportunity that you talked about in the beginning of this conversation. Number one, do I qualify? And number two, if people are interested in applying to that, what type of designer are you looking for? Like what exactly are you looking to, or who are you looking to hire? Because I'm sure you're going to get a lot of applicants, and it would be great to hear from you. What exactly do they need to be considered?
It's a great question. I'll answer the first one because that's a lot easier. We're looking for people that will be in college or graduating college by 2022. So if you are graduated now, sadly, I think for our program, you don't qualify. Like we have a lot. I don't run the overall like program and requirements, so that was like a requirement, was that you're an active student or recently or soon to be graduated student, but not graduated students as of now. So that's how you know you qualify. And you're studying industrial design. So far we've had a lot of applicants that are, I don't know, they have a very wide range of backgrounds that are not industrial design. So industrial design background. What kind of design are we looking for? I'd like to look at the job posting. Like, what did I write there? But I mean, on one hand, we need someone who's like very self-starter. So I think part of the environment that we're working in is being able to operate semi-independently and not need like a lot of hands-on supervision. So that means like being able to present your ideas clearly. And part of presenting is sketch skills, CAD skills. Part of that is communication skills. I think we'd be really like I personally am looking for someone with really strong communication skills and the ability to express the design decisions they made and why they made them. And I think that combination would be pretty strong.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for answering that and for your insights. I think we had a really good discussion today. And again, this Lens session has been recorded. We'll upload it on our YouTube for those who missed it or you want to reference it later. But Jon, thank you so much. This was fantastic. And thank you for keeping it real.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for having me.
Sounds good. All right, everyone. Have a good evening and take care.